back to Rods with Ray. Tonight we're working on the 47 Ford right behind me. It's a 47 Ford Coupe, 5-window. It has a rack and pinion steering setup from a Mustang 2 front end. At least that's what they call it. So it's got a Mustang 2 power rack and pinion on the front on a custom frame, and we have to somehow connect the steering column to that Mustang 2 front end. So we're going to walk through that video here today, and I'll kind of give you a little guidance on how you make a small block Chevy, LT1, LS engine, whatever you may have, work on a custom Mustang 2 rack and pinion and a steering column that you buy from Summit Racing Equipment. So stay tuned. Here's a motor that we've discussed numerous times over the past few videos. This here is the reservoir tank for the power steering pump. It's actually from a Chevy Caprice. You can also get it in a 92 to 96 Corvette. This remote power steering reservoir is a way that you can keep it separated into the left side, since the accessory drive is on the right. I actually am using a stock LT1 power steering pump with a lock-arm braid kit that comes, you can get it from Summit Racing, Jags, several other places that you can pretty much just order it up and go. The rack and pinion, which you can barely see it down there, is a Mustang 2 rack and pinion. It's this little bar at the bottom down there, which when we jack it up and we put the fittings in, I'll explain further on what it does. But to get started, here is the steering column that I ordered from Summit Racing Equipment, as the original one that came with the car was not going to cut it. The steering column comes with all the wires to plug in for your turn signals, headlights, horns, so on and so forth. And it also comes with the flasher switch, the turn signal lever, and you can add some other features. This one is a tilt column, and it has this sleeve, this collar that comes with it. You can actually see it's a two-piece collar, and this is how it mounts to the dashboard, which I will show you here in just a moment. And then here is the shaft that comes through for the actual steering shaft that goes down to the rack and pinion. So let's go ahead and mock it up in the car. So I was able to carefully slide this column through the hole here in the floor that is actually the factory location for steering column on a 47 Ford Coupe. Luckily, I was able to mock it up so that I can take the bracket that comes with this two-piece collar that slides over the main shaft and put it right here under the dash. I'm gonna zoom out just a hair. See if we can make it a little better. There we go. So this actually bolts through the bottom of the dashboard. And the reason I set it right here is I want to try to keep it tucked in the best I can for driving position. So I did some measuring from the floor back, and then I did some measuring from this collar here to the steering wheel, and then adjusted it according to where I want it to be for my seating position, which is going to be different for every single person. So all you do is you slide the shaft through the floor, mock up the collar as we did, and then they bolt together. Just like that. They slide up into each other and bolt together. So here we are on this end of the steering column as it comes out of the hole of the floor into the engine compartment. And as you see, I have a pretty decent amount of space here with these headers that I chose. But in the meantime, I cut and measured where I want this shaft to come out. It actually comes much longer. You just have to cut it to what you want the stub to look like. And as you see, it spins. And that's how we get the articulation. This does not spin, the actual shaft on the inside spins across bearings and other shims that are on the inside of the collar. However, now that we're underneath on the other side, you can see where the rack and pinion has a stub that is actually splined. Maybe hard to see in the video, but this is a spline stub that comes out of the rack and pinion. And so you have the spline stub here, and you have the knuckle for the steering shaft here. So how do we get it to connect from here to there? So here is the first knuckle that I actually had here in my garage. Ironically, it matched the spline because it's a pretty common spline. And this knuckle goes to a similar design shaft that you see on the steering column, but it's a little bit smaller. This stuff is a little rusty from sitting around, which whatever, I'll sand it down with some red Scotch-Brite, maybe some sandpaper, and then paint it up. But this here slides on the rack and pinion. This is the size shaft that fits in there, so then you slide this in here, knock it down with the lockers here. You see there's a little Allen head that locks it down, and then there's one here that locks it down on that side. I actually like to weld them when I have everything set up right. Basically give one disconnect point, otherwise weld it solid and make it nice. Now here is the third piece. This is not cheap, my friend. This here is a knuckle that allows you to go from this size to the larger size shaft that is on the steering column. Here's the part number for it. Basically it's a, you can see the size right there, 3/4 to 1 inch. So that means this is 3/4 and the one on the actual steering column is 1 inch. So I'm gonna open this up and I'm gonna start assembling things. Alright, so while we wait for the paint to dry, I'll show you what we're doing here on the rack and pinion. The rack and pinion is a Mustang 2, like I said, and the reason people use it is the ease of installation and design. Not much to it. You got two massive bolts here that go through to the frame, from the rack and pinion through the rack and pinion to the frame. You bolt it down and basically set up your tie rod ends to your width and go from there. But in the meantime, I'll show you what I'm doing next. If I can get the camera up here, let's see here. I don't think I can. Here is the threaded portions of the actual rack and pinion where the fittings for the power steering hose actually go. Let me see if I can get my finger right here. In these ports were two little red caps. Those red caps, when you take them out, they keep dust and everything out of it. When you take them out, on the top of it, it actually has the size of the plug. One was 14 and one was 16 millimeter. So after buying the Lockar power steering line kit, which you see right here, I went ahead and made the lines to my dimensions that I wanted them to be, and they are 8 AN thread pitch. So they thread right onto there. So you got your 14 and 16 millimeter plugs and your 8 AN fitting to put the lines on. These I had to actually make. They're called a PTFE hose. It's got like a plastic hose on the inside of this. They use it for E85 as well. It's good for high pressure, and it's also good for corrosive material. Luckily, power steering fluid is not corrosive, but it is good for the high pressure that they are used for. So on the other end of this goes to the pump, which you can see has a fitting similar to what I just showed for the rack and pinion. And so you have to science that out, and you can actually find a red plug on those or look it up online. It's easy to find. And the other end goes to the reservoir. So you have two lines, one from the reservoir goes across here to the bottom of the pump has the positive pressure side that comes down here. So in the meantime, we're gonna go ahead and start threading these in. So after talking to a buddy of mine, I decided to take these back out and add some thread sealant on it. I don't personally think it needs it, but he said you be safe than sorry, so I'm gonna move up the ring here a little bit more, a little bit of grease, and then I'm going to use some high temperature thread sealant that you would use for sealing any water jacket or watertight seal, say for thermostat. plug or, you know, maybe a head bolt of some nature. But with a little bit on it, it goes a long way, so I'll throw that on there. Pull the next one out, do the exact same thing. Throw just a little bit of grease on the O-ring, and again, forgive the heater in the background. It gets very cold up here in the hills of Colorado. So I lube that up a little bit. Add just a little bit of thread gun, not too much. I don't need to get carried away. And then I'm going to go ahead and throw that plug in. Now that we got a better camera angle so I could work here, go ahead and bring these lines down and start threading them in when I get the right angle that I position them for. And pretty happy with that. Let's just get started. Now, if you're wondering what order to put these on, the pressure line off the pump should go to the larger port, which is the 16mm plug, which was on the top. And then the return should go on the bottom, which is the smaller port, obviously, which is 14mm. So just get them started, and then we'll get a wrench on there. Boy, as much fun as it is to watch paint dry, I'm happy it's done. So let's go ahead and get started on building the shaft outside of the car before we actually put it in on the rack and pinion and connect to the steering column. But before I do that, I want to show you kind of the full assembly here. Here is where the shaft slides into this knuckle. See that right there? And you can see it on this side. This is very important to note because you don't want the shaft to interfere with the knuckle when it turns. So you take a depth of that. You can kind of see between the knuckle and the top. You want it to basically go in enough that you can lock it down with the lock nut, but not too far to interfere with the knuckle. So I already did that. I put this knuckle on the rack and pinion, the one with the spline, and then I measured with this knuckle attached to the steering column, and then measured between and added the amount that goes into the actual knuckle and cut this shaft to fit. So since I already did that, it's kind of a boring process, so I figured I'd just tell you what I did rather than actually do it. I'm going to go ahead and try to get this assembled outside of the car. So, now that I got these into the actual joint where I want them, you take this lock and start threading it in there. Actually, I have a socket that might help, but if I can get it started, I'd be in better shape. Let's see here. There we go. Take the socket and lock her on down so that it doesn't come out. And then once you have this locked down, like I said, some people weld. I do sometimes. I like to weld the joints so that they're nice and strong. I do a lot of drag racing, and it's just safer that way. But keep in mind, you don't want to weld it all up and never take it apart. So we have the shaft built out. Everything's locked down nice and tight. ready to go into the actual car. So we're gonna go ahead and take this shaft, we're gonna feed it down past the header, lock it into the steering box, lock it into the column, and then the articulation, bend the tires. So go ahead and get that in there. Okay, so I don't know if it's just because I'm recording or not paying attention, but I made a rookie mistake. Let me show you what's going on. We have the shaft here that goes down into the rack and pinion down as so. Problem is, it's gonna all lock together as one piece, and I put the steering column in first. Something has to give. What you actually do is you put the shaft onto the rod, then get everything lined up, and then you drop the column onto the knuckle and tighten it down. If you do it before, there's no way you can get it in there. So pulling the column back out. What I did is I actually took everything out and I built it outside of the car. Let me show you. So this tends to slide over the splines of the rack and pinion a lot smoother. And I was having a hard time getting on here, so I got it on here, I locked it down, and I'm going to feed it through the firewall and connect it into the rack and pinion. So let's get that done. All right, like a glove.